All right, well let's dive in. I know we've got a full docket today. Can everybody hear me okay? I am
Mhm.
I'm currently outside one of Alexandria's lovely rec centers. um all right, well, good morning everybody. Welcome to our fifth meeting of the Climate, Energy and Environmental Policy Committee for 2025. I'm Sarah Bagley, City Council member in the City of Alexandria. I want to thank Councilmember Dabala for handling the role of chair for our July meeting. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry to miss the meeting, but I did enjoy some lovely California wine. So thank you very much for accommodating that. With no other objections, we will dive in. The first piece of committee business we have today is to adopt the meeting summary from our July meeting. There's a lot of us here today. Motions and seconds can be made verbally or in the chat box if staff can help me with that. Is there a motion to approve the meeting summary? I'm looking and listening. I heard a motion. Is there a second? And then a second from Ms. Dabala, I think. Okay, I think it was a motion, I believe, by Mr. Washburn. So there's a motion and a second. Any conversation, discussion, changes on the meeting summary? Okay, hearing none, unless, and we're peeking in the chat. Okay, the meeting summary is approved. So for the next item on the agenda, we're pleased to be joined by Mr. Peter Claggett of the United States Geological Service. Mr. Claggett joins us today to share the recently released Chesapeake Bay program data on land use, land cover for our region. This data is used to assess our progress on our tree canopy coverage over time. So pleased that we are able to get this update. Mr. Claggett, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. And so some of the slides that I'm going to show I think were showed earlier to some of you by my colleague, Michelle Kotowski. I've changed a few of them and focus some of the stats on the counties and the COG region. But otherwise, I apologize in advance if this is a repeat of what some of you have seen recently. So I run the land data team at the Chesapeake Bay Program Office. And what we do is one of the things we do is oversee the development of land use and land cover data for the whole Chesapeake Bay watershed. Next slide. We've been mapping since about 2015. We started the effort to map at high resolution, 1 meter resolution, land cover and land use throughout the whole Chesapeake Bay watershed and all intersecting counties. So we have like the whole state of Delaware, we have the whole state of Maryland. And this has been a joint effort with the Chesapeake Conservancy's Conservation Innovation Center, the University of Vermont Spatial Analysis Laboratory, USGS, and EPA at the Bay Program. So all in all, I think the number of, if you count the students, the number of people involved in this project is probably like 30 or 35. Kind of fluctuates over the years, but our first release of 16 classes of land use land cover was in 2017. And then in 2022, we released a 54 class data set for 2017-18 based off of 2017-18 imagery. And we redid the earlier data so that it was consistent. And then most recently, last year, we released data based on 2021, 2022 imagery. Again, 1 meter resolution, this time 56 classes. And we redid the 2017-18 again. And we redid, or for the first time, and we redid the 2013-14 data again to make them consistent. So every time we change the classification or change some of our rules in developing these data, we have to go back through time and correct the historic data so that it's consistent. Because this is really a monitoring program as much as it is a mapping program. We want to monitor change, we want to track change in tree canopy, impervious cover, and other things over time. And EPA has initiated another agreement with the Chesapeake Conservancy. So we will be mapping the whole watershed with 2025, 2026 imagery and plan to release those data in 2028. again, so this is the mapping region. It covers 99,000 square miles. We have the information for 3 epochs or 3 dates in time and 56 classes. Next. And generally, for the whole watershed, it is mostly natural. The developed class is growing. And because we're mapping at high resolution, we're also capturing things like turf grass and other developed classes that you wouldn't necessarily capture with coarser resolution data. Next slide. For development, we have multiple classes, about 7 different classes that characterize developed areas. Roads, structures, other impervious, which would be like driveways, sidewalks, parking lots, tree canopy over impervious, turf grass, tree canopy over turf grass. So these are like backyard and front yard trees for the most part. And then other pervious developed, these would be things like solar fields, which I know particularly are an issue in Northern Virginia, transmission line right-of-ways, road right-of-ways that may be semi-compacted. Next slide. So I mentioned these are land use or land cover data. So we start actually with land cover, which is the characterization of the Earth's surface. And this work has been done by the University of Vermont. They used mainly NAEP imagery, so aerial imagery with 4 different bands and LiDAR imagery where it's available. And they used a basically object-oriented classification software called eCognition to cluster areas that look similar and then classify those areas into 12 different land cover classes. Next slide. And then land use, which you all may be more familiar with, things like residential, commercial, cropland, pasture. That's the land use side. And to go from land cover to land use requires the integration of about 25 different other spatial data sets in a rule-based model that translates what we see as, say, herbaceous vegetation. Is it cropland? Is it pasture? Is it turf grass? Is it land undergoing natural succession? What is it? And depending on your answer, it could be one of the highest polluting land uses in the Chesapeake Bay or one of the least. So it's really important to get land use correct and to work with land use data rather than just land cover data for a lot of environmental applications. Next. So we have land uses, about 28 unique land uses, and we have 11 unique land cover types. And combining those, that yields the 56 land use land cover classes in our final data set. So you can take that final data set, which is a raster data set at 1 meter resolution. You can collapse it all down to the land cover. You can collapse it to multiple, different land use classifications depending on your needs. Next slide. So this is the whole 56 class schema. You can see that a lot of these names are land use coupled with land cover. So like solar field barren, solar field herbaceous, solar field shrubland. The reason we do that is so that you can get back to the land cover types if needed, like you wanted to know where are all the barren lands in my county. Next slide. And there's different ways, as I mentioned, of aggregating the data internally. We sometimes use the data as just land cover on your left, or the generalized 18 class land use data. That's kind of our favorite. And when we produce maps on the web and try to visualize what's going on in a county, we usually gravitate towards that 18 general land use classification. But of course, we can aggregate it up further and make it coarser, like 4 macro classes like natural, agricultural, developed, water. But usually some of the more detailed data is what becomes more useful for most people. Next slide. So when it comes to defining tree canopy and forested extent, we have these kind of two definitions that you've probably heard us talk about, or that we put in our communication materials. So tree cover is synonymous with tree canopy, and it's basically a pure land cover class. It's just I see the crown of trees. I'm mapping it as that because they're vegetated, they're tall. We're going to call them trees, and that's what composes the tree cover or tree canopy class. And then forest extent is of that tree canopy. Where do we see tree canopy that has an unmanaged understory? It's either like large patches where we think it's kind of forest, or small patches, which we call like other forest, or land undergoing natural succession and timber harvest, where we expect that land to revert to forest if left alone. So all four of those kind of forest and herbaceous, early successional classes, those get put into forest extent. And so that's another way we try to communicate the trends that we see going on, because the biggest change in the watershed in every state is timber harvest. And a lot of times when you're talking about trends in tree canopy, you want to focus on things other than just kind of rotational timber harvest activities, and you don't want that to skew or bias your statistics. Next slide. And then these are the general statistics for the states in the COG region, showing the total percent tree cover and the total percent forested extent. And as you can see, like Maryland and Virginia, when we're dealing with, big areas that include rural parts of states and rural counties, the forest extent is usually much larger than just the tree canopy. But in DC, the tree canopy percentage is larger, and that's because you have a lot of trees over impervious and a lot of tree canopy over turf grass, and that's why that would be excluded from forested extent. Next slide. So it's hard to display these kinds of numbers without bugging out, but these are basically the tree canopy, acres of tree canopy, and the percent of the land area that's tree canopy in the various COG jurisdictions. They're sorted. This whole table is sorted by the column to the far right, total percent tree canopy in 2021. So like Charles County, Prince William County have the most tree canopy per unit area, per land area of any of the counties. And then the more smaller cities and stuff have the least percent tree canopy, as kind of expected. Next slide. So then this is sorted a different way. So this is tree canopy change, and it's sorted by the column in the far right, percent tree canopy change. So this is tree canopy, change in tree canopy acres relative to the total amount of tree canopy in the county. So that's the percent tree canopy calculation. So where we see the greatest, and negatives are in parentheses in all these tables. So where we see the greatest declines in tree canopy would be like Prince George's County, Loudoun County, Montgomery County. And that's pretty much goes for both acres and percent. And of course, that's where a lot of the development has been occurring over time. Next slide. Oh, wait, before you go, sorry, can you go back? So I included that one column in red. So that's Michael Knapp's data that he summarized from our earlier 2022 edition. So when we first released the change from 2013-14 to 2017-18, he calculated the change in tree canopy for the various jurisdictions. Now, we went back when we released the latest data, we went back and updated the 2017 and updated the 2013. And so the column just to the right of the column in red is the new data. And you can see side by side, and generally they're pretty similar, but if you look down the list of Frederick County, it's a huge change from an increase in that first period of 113 acres is what we're saying now. Whereas in the past, it looked like there was an increase of 2,000 acres. So that is a pretty big change, something we're going to look into, delve into later about, I don't know offhand yet what's driving that difference, but we are asking that people use the latest data and don't mix and match additions. So don't just tack on the changes from the last 3 years to what you calculated based on our previous data, because they are different. Next slide. Okay, and then here, what I'm highlighting is tree canopy change to development. So this would be more of a, you wouldn't expect the canopy to come back necessarily. And so I've summarized this for the change periods. And because we have like 20, the base year in Maryland is 2013 and the base year in Virginia is 2014, it gets cumbersome to keep saying that 2013, 14 and blah, blah, blah. So we often internally refer to these as time one, T1, T2, and T3. That way, no matter where you are in the watershed, you kind of know what you're talking about without specifying the years. So we have tree canopy. The first column is tree canopy to development from time 1 to time 2. That's 2013, 14 to 2017, 18. And then we have tree canopy change to development from time 2 to time 3. And then we have directly from time 1 to time 3. And then I have percent tree canopy change to development as a percentage of total tree canopy in the jurisdiction. That's the fourth column. And then the other columns to the right are forested extent changes. And one thing that, if you're looking at these data, you can't, the changes from T1 to T2 and from T2 to T3 do not exactly equal the change from T1 to T3 because there's different dynamics going on. So just so you know, I mean, they're close, but they won't exactly equal each other, and they shouldn't necessarily equal each other. And this table is sorted by the middle column, percent tree canopy change to development from T1 to T3. Next slide. So enough of all those tables. I just put those out there. So these are different ways we can slice and dice the data, and we can, all these data are publicly available. So everything I'm showing you is publicly available or obtainable. What I'm showing you right here is, this is from Google Earth, and this is showing Manassas Park. And Manassas Park showed a high percentage of tree canopy change from the 2013-14 to, from 2014 in Virginia to 2021. So we wanted to look at that. So next slide, it's animated. So you go from 2011 to 2024, and I'm not going to ask you to flip back and forth, but you have to really squint to be like, what's going on? Like, it looks like basically, you know, they're tinted differently, but it looks like pretty much the same thing. Next slide. But if you squint and you look closer, you will see that there is tree canopy loss, and these are areas where tree canopy has been lost. And flip forward, please. And then flip back and forward it one more time, just so, you know, we can all see what's happening. Okay, but you don't have to do this. Now, obviously, you can do this without our data anywhere, with just Google Earth. But you don't have to do that, and you can quantify the amount of change. So if you go to the next slide. So the Chesapeake Conservancy has created this awesome viewer. It's really the first place you should go for our data, even though I'm going to give you another place to go as well to download it. But this interface enables you to visualize all of the wall-to-wall data, and what's, I think, the coolest is the change overlaid over the exact imagery that was classified to produce the data to begin with. So you may have aerial photography for your jurisdiction and you overlay our data on top of it and you find some disagreement. Well, the best comparison is using the exact imagery that we used for the classification. So what this is showing is for Manassas Park. Now it's a different projection, so things are tilted, basically probably 40 degrees to the right. But this is Manassas Park, and this shows you the 2013-14 imagery on the left and the 2021-2022 imagery on the right with the change areas highlighted. And all those areas that I circled that we saw a tree canopy change, they're highlighted in this. Most of those are yellow. And what yellow means is basically it went from trees to like herbaceous or barren. And so it's kind of like the early stages of construction. Because that last image from Google Earth I showed you was 2024, not 2021. Next slide. So another way to look at these data are with the tree canopy fact sheets that the U.S. Forest Service and the Chesapeake Conservancy developed. And this is nice because it gives you just one-stop shopping, say for Manassas Park or any municipality in the watershed, any incorporated municipality in all the counties and incorporated cities. You can obtain these fact sheets. And what I like most about them personally is the map on the right-hand side at the top shows you where you have spatially, where you have losses and gains in tree canopy in like a simple snapshot. And this is great for understanding the kind of the patterns of change. And then you could look at that viewer and figure out exactly what changed where. And you could download the data and you could quantify it in a GIS for any subpart of the region. So I know there's a lot of like COG municipalities in Maryland that we didn't necessarily summarize our data to, but that it's not that difficult of a GIS process to do that. Next slide. So we also have these data on a government site, which is why it looks the way it does. So you can download the data from here too directly. And in fact, if you go to the nice viewer and you download the data from there, it will eventually send you here. It will ask some information that's voluntary to give on how you're going to use the information because we want to collect and archive use cases. But it'll eventually send you here to download the data. Next. All right, there's one of those codes. Next. So, not only do we have, all the data for all the years, both change and kind of the wall-to-wall representation of land use land cover, we have that by state, we have it by county. It can be downloaded that way. We also have summarized the data in various tables. So if you just wanted statistics for a jurisdiction, you could just download the tables. Next slide. So this is a table. And this is basically the generalized 18 land uses by state. And all the units, when we report land use numbers like this, they're always in acres because we're still not on the metric system. Next slide. So one of the things that I like, and I may be, I don't know, on a limb here, but I love these change matrices. So for every combination of years, for all the different land use roll up, the aggregations of land use, we have these change matrices. So you can look on the rows represent the classes in 2014. And the columns represent those same classes in 2021. So you can see blanks in the diagonal. So roads changing to roads, we're not reporting, no change, so we don't report it. So all the numbers on this table represent an acreage change of something to something else. Next. So you can see here, if you add up those four numbers, that's forested extent. It's the two forest classes, harvested forest, natural succession, changing to turf grass. So, and this is Loudoun County. So almost 1,800 acres of forested extent was converted to turf grass from 2014 to 2021. And then you could look at the viewer and be like, where did that happen? Next slide. That's it. So I don't know if we have time for questions or what have you, but I know that was pretty quick. Hopefully I showed you information that you were interested in, but if not, we can talk about it more.
Thank you, Mr. Claggett, for the presentation. I see some hands up. Maya, do you want to help me? Because I can't see everybody at the same time. I see your hand is up, and I think I saw another council member's hand go up.
I don't see other hands up.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I wanted to, I found that I appreciated the effort to sort of show so much data in these charts. I think the fact that they have different baseline timestamps, probably like you referenced, makes it hard to do the apples to apples, across jurisdictions. I'm curious, is there any regional conversation, or is there a way away from that moving forward so that it is less noisy in the data, so that there isn't like, baselines happening at different times?
Well, okay, I guess a couple things. So for the tables that I showed in this presentation were mixing dates. We have in the tables that you download, the dates for each jurisdiction are in there. So when you're coming up with, say, like an annual rate of change and you want to compare jurisdiction to jurisdiction, you'll know in the table whether it's like 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, like what the change period is. So you can do that to make it more apples to apples. But of course, it's not the exact same date combination, right?
Yeah.
So in order to do that, we have to coordinate across all the states with the USDA NAEP cost share programs. And that is something that's been of interest to us for a long time. It basically would be a full-time job for somebody to do that over multiple years. And the states don't always, get along when it comes to this kind of stuff. So it's unfortunate. I wish they would all coordinate, but they don't.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that's what bodies like this are sort of, we're trying to overcome, as bring a more regional view and have apples to apples. So, but I appreciate what you're getting at. Sort of individually, we can track these pieces. And I guess one other quick question I have, I don't mean to monopolize, but this is an issue in Alexandria that people are very invested in, is it sort of discusses tree canopy in a blanket way, but is the relative age or youth or condition of that canopy assessed in any way? Sometimes development produces new canopy, but it's younger, smaller, less shade producing. And so I was just curious, and apologies if I haven't, sunk into the data myself yet, but does the data kind of reflect on the quality of the canopy in any way versus just kind of its existence? And I use quality in a non-scientific way there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's a question that we have too. I mean, we're not telling you why the canopy is changing. And I think I've talked to a lot of reporters about these data. And that's one of the first things I do is try to caution them in like, this isn't like the Biggest Loser contest, right? Like there there are reasons some of the most well-planned communities lose a lot of tree canopy, but they're planning for development. They're trying to concentrate development and protect the rural lands, and that may result in a loss of tree canopy in an area where there's a lot of trees. So it doesn't mean that, you know, growth is out of control, or it could be that they're actually trying to manage and control growth, but they still happen to be really high on the list. Vice versa, you could have suburban sprawl taking over all these farmlands, and then converting farmlands to subdivisions, and people plant trees in their yards. And then 10 years later, we see all these trees. It used to be all crop and pasture. Now we see all these trees. They must be doing a great job, have all these tree planting programs. And it's actually, no, they're Bradford pears and they're in people's yards. So yeah, we don't, but it's something that we're trying to get at. And we're actually, with this new agreement with the Conservancy and one of their subcontractors, TerraPulse, we're mining the entire Sentinel and Landsat archive back to the 80s. And Sentinel and Landsat are two satellites, different satellite platforms, and they have many more spectral bands than just the 4 used in the aerial imagery. And those greater spectral bands can tell us something about the condition of the forest, like if there's defoliation due to, due to bugs or disease or something like that. This, the issue of the age of trees, I think is really prescient. And, I think it is likely that we're going to be seeing more loss in communities where the canopy is older and the trees are more mature and stuff. And all those are really great questions that, honestly, I'm hoping that one of the results of these data, having these data out there, is that they will prompt hypotheses and people being like, hey, we need money to assess what's happening, because we tell a story behind losing, 2,000 acres of trees.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you sort of speaking to, you know, so development sometimes, to your point, can be done to protect existing canopy, elsewhere, and the trade-offs with emissions that we're going to hear about as we move into other presentations today in transportation and, people, density versus, more suburban design. So I really appreciate the presentation. Maya, if we don't see any other
Yeah,
hands.
actually, Chair Bagley, we do have a question
Great.
from Councilmember Dabala. So I don't know if she wants to come off and ask her question verbally, or we can do that for her. But then I have one comment and quick question before we wrap up as well.
My question was, if the municipality such as Tacoma Park is not on the table, what is available? Is it just the raw data? Are there the fact sheets? Could you say that again? You alluded to it earlier. Thank you. I'm not able to hear you.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I will check to see if Tacoma Park is one of our incorporated municipalities that we have on our list, or Elliot, I see him, he may know offhand. If so, we have a tree canopy fact sheet for it. If we don't have a tree canopy fact sheet for a jurisdiction, then we just have the raw data that could be aggregated and to that jurisdiction. But it would have to be a at somebody's request. I mean, we'll respond to it. If you wanted information for your jurisdiction and you don't see it, we could get that to you. I don't know if we could make a whole separate fact sheet, but we could certainly get you some statistics about what's happening.
Thank you very much.
And so I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that, COG uses this data in a number of ways. And, related to the climate and energy work, we do use this for the greenhouse gas inventories. Once all the data and information is finalized, Peter Claggett and the Chesapeake Conservancy, they work with ICLEI on incorporating it into the Learn tool, which helps us calculate sequestration for jurisdictions across the region. So it's really, this is extremely high quality data that's not available otherwise. And so we appreciate all their work on this. We also want to incorporate all this great information and data and some of the results in the fact sheets into our mid-course review, which we'll touch on later. But my question is, are all the fact sheets currently available and final, or when will they be final? Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, they're all available and final.
I included the link to access them in the chat, as well as a story map that the Bay program put together.
And I see that Tacoma Park has a fact sheet. So yay, thanks, Julie.
All right.
And
Well,
just to add,
oh, go ahead,
oh,
Heidi.
sorry.
No, please.
I was just going to say the Regional Tree Canopy Subcommittee is a subcommittee to the Bay Policy, or I'm sorry, to the CEEPC committee, and they meet regularly and just also receive this data, so it's being used to help track the regional tree canopy goal through 2050 as well. So much appreciated, Peter, and to you and your colleagues.
Well, thank you, Heidi and Peter, for the presentation and for this data. I know it's of great interest to many in our area, and will continue to be sort of a key data point. If there's no other questions on this item, we're going to move on in our agenda. I'd like to welcome next Ms. Deb Harris from ICF, who will brief us on the comprehensive climate action plan being developed for our region. Ms. Harris, the floor is yours.
Hey everyone. Deb wasn't able to make it today, so on behalf of ICF, myself and my colleague Emily Carr will be presenting today. And we'll be running through an update on the comprehensive climate action plan that we've been helping COG put together over the past almost 2 years now. So I'll turn it over to Emily to kick us off.
Thanks, Tiana. You can go to the next slide, please. So for this presentation, first, I'll give some background on the CPRG program. Then I'll show our draft results for the greenhouse gas inventory and business as usual projections. Next, I'll walk you through the CEEPC greenhouse gas reduction measures list and emission reduction potential for those measures. And then finally, I'll pass it back to Fiona to show the results of our workforce assessment. Next slide, please. So the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants, or CPRG program, provided grants to states and metropolitan statistical areas, including the DC area, to develop and implement plans to reduce economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollution. There were multiple rounds of planning included in the grant. The first round was called the Priority Climate Action Plan, or PCAP, and that was due March 1st, 2024. And then the second round, called the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, or CEEPC, is due December 1st of this year. And COG is managing the $1 million of funding under the program, but the whole plan includes all of the COG counties plus additional counties in Virginia and West Virginia, as shown in the map on the right. Next slide, please. And so, as I just mentioned, the CEEPC takes a look at economy-wide emission reductions. So we're looking at ways to reduce emissions in the transportation, buildings, electric power, waste, agriculture, and natural and working land sectors. The plan is taking a what would it take approach to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So it models a list of aggressive but feasible greenhouse gas mitigation strategies to put the region on a pathway to net zero emissions by 2050. And then finally, in addition to the greenhouse gas modeling, there are also other analyses required in the plan, like a benefits analysis assessing how the measures will impact co-pollutants, and then a workforce assessment to identify any gaps in the workforce for implementing the plan. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the 2020 greenhouse gas inventory that we're using for the PCAP. So as you can see there in dark pink, the on-road transportation sector is the MSA's largest source of emissions at 33% of gross emissions from the MSA. And then the second largest sector is commercial buildings at 24%. And then one thing to note is that natural and working lands is a net carbon sink rather than a source of emissions. So the share of emissions from each sector in that table on the right is calculated before subtracting out the carbon removals from the natural and working land sector. Next slide, please. So this graph shows the BAU emissions for the MSA starting in the inventory year of 2020 and then forecasted out to 2050. On-road transportation is expected to stay as the highest emitting sector through 2050. You might also notice that there is a decline in the total BAU emissions over time, which is mostly a result of clean electricity being projected to be an increasing share of the electricity mix in the future from the Virginia Clean Economy Act and from DC and Maryland's renewable portfolio standards. Next slide, please. This is a list of all the measures that we're including in the CEEPC here for documentation purposes in case you want to look at it afterward. The list is largely the same as the measure list for the PCAP, with some new additions in the building sector for data centers and then a new addition for community engagement. Next slide, please. And this is the result of the economy-wide analysis. If you're not familiar with wedge charts, the way you can read this is that the top of the graph, the black line there, that's the total BAU emissions. Then the size of each section or wedge of the chart represents the size of the greenhouse gas reductions associated with each measure. And then the bottom of the graph, that red dotted line represents the amount of emissions left. So the measure that results in the most greenhouse gas emission reductions by 2050 is the zero emission vehicle adoption measure in dark pink, followed by the buildings measures in blue, which are things like building energy efficiency and electrification. Next slide, please. So there's a few slides here that are also just kind of here for documentation purposes, which walk through our key modeling assumptions and the drivers behind those assumptions. I'm not going to go through them all now, but they're available in the slides in case you want to take a closer look. So if you go to the next slide, we have our assumptions for the transportation sector. And then on the next slide, there are our assumptions for the natural and working lands, waste, and rooftop solar modeling. Next slide, please. So in addition to the greenhouse gas reduction analysis, the CPRG program also requires an analysis of how co-pollutants will change as a result of the measures. This followed a similar structure where we had an inventory of criteria air pollutants and hazardous air pollutants for each county. And then we projected these for a BAU scenario from EPA's NEI data. And then we estimated the reduction in co-pollutants as a result of the measures. The analysis covered the co-pollutants listed at the bottom of the slide here. Next slide, please. And these are the draft results of the changes to co-pollutants that we're seeing from implementing the economy-wide measures. We're seeing a cumulative reduction in each of the co-pollutants over time as a result of the measures. Next slide, please. And then using those reductions in co-pollutants, we ran the co-benefits risk assessment or COBRA screening model. to understand what the reductions in certain types of incidents might be and then the associated avoided healthcare costs. We found that there would be reductions in each of the categories in the table on the right, including cardiovascular conditions, hospital visits, missed school or work, mortality, and respiratory conditions, and that the region could save hundreds of millions of dollars per year on healthcare-related costs. Next slide, please. And I will pass it to Fiona for the workforce analysis.
Thanks, Emily. So one of the final pieces or kind of main components of the CEEPC requirements is to conduct a workforce assessment for the region that looks at potential gaps, barriers, or challenges that could be a limitation to successfully implementing the greenhouse gas reduction measures. So this could be looking at potential shortages in trained EV technicians or heat pump installers across the region, and then working to identify some potential partners and solutions to address the identified challenges. The analysis we conducted really focused on occupations impacted directly by the measures. There's some examples down here for transportation. So it looks at like civil engineers, urban and regional planners, electricians, vehicle installers and repairers, rail technicians as well, and bus drivers. And then there's a similar list of occupations for all of the other sectors. There's certainly a lot of overlap, especially in the engineer space across sectors. So one of the limitations of doing the data analysis in particular is that everything is at the occupation level. So we can't really understand from the reported data, at least, sub-occupation or specific barriers around the EV or heat pump space. So this is really a high-level look at potential shortages and impacts to occupations. And then we did meet with a few stakeholders and do some outreach to try to understand more of that specific context as well. Next slide, please. So the next two slides just show a snapshot of the results. So this is here for your reference, but this is kind of a summary of what the data looks like in the gap analysis, where you have the occupation identified, the sector that it's relevant for, the projected employment, and then potential shortage or surplus in 2025. So this is looking at current year data. The kind of main takeaway in these tables, and these are really just showing the occupations with the largest either shortage or surplus in 2025. And the main takeaway is that there really isn't a single occupation or multiple occupations with large shortages in the region, which is great. We're starting from a pretty balanced market of supply and demand for these identified occupations. Most supply and demand are within 1 to 2% of each other. Some of the largest shortages here are showing up in kind of the laborers space and construction laborers. Part of that is just because these are cyclical and seasonal jobs. It may show a potential shortage or surplus in varying years. Next slide. And then this is that same kind of framework, but this time for the workforce surplus in 2025. Again, no single occupation that we looked at that had a particular surplus. Everything's pretty well balanced. There were some noted surpluses in the heavy duty tractor trailer truck driving space in the waste sector, and some engineers as well, but well within the definition of kind of a balanced workforce. Next slide. So some of the kind of key takeaways, again, no major gaps at the occupation level. We also did a skills and training assessment in the region and looked at kind of a sampling of community college and other training programs to look at what might be available specific to these occupations to make sure that we're creating and preparing the workforce to be able to support these measures going forward. So looking really specifically at things like HVAC or heat pump training programs, EV and automotive programs, rooftop solar programs, and found that there is pretty good training capacity in the region related to building trades in particular and electricians, but some potential shortages related to EV maintenance and energy auditors. Those are two that came up repeatedly in our stakeholder engagement conversations. Those ones for EV maintenance and energy auditors are sub-level occupations, so we don't have data on their employment rates in the region, but we did hear that there were a lot of challenges in hiring them and maintaining or retaining them in the workforce in the region. And then generally from a solutioning perspective, some of the things that came up in conversation were ensuring that comprehensive solutions are being discussed, going beyond the bounds of just traditional training to ensure equitable access to that training, but also to focus on what the broader needs are for worker retention. So thinking about, competitive pay, how to think through the higher cost of housing in the region. And then on the training part, in terms of equitable access, that could be thinking about more internship programs, alternative career pathways, doing more early professional education and information sharing at the high school level within and outside of technical high schools to make sure students and potential young professionals understand the kind of compensation available and the stability of some of these career paths. Next slide. This is just an example of one of the programs that Montgomery County highlighted for us. That was a successful partnership between the county and some of the community college building contractors and their transit workforce center. That was an employee training program focused on kind of emerging transportation related technologies, including battery buses, hydrogen, and EV charging. So the goal was an apprenticeship program focused on building trades, but also some of the aspects that touch transportation. And with this registered apprentice approach, they saw a 92% boost in retention rates. So just a really good example of a local successful program that could be replicated or scaled in the region, and that is focused on these kind of quote unquote green jobs in the region. Next slide. I think that might be it. Yeah, so we are in September 2025 now. So this month we've been meeting with a series of COG committees, including ACPAC, BEAC, and then CEEPC to kind of go through some of these results, share the status update, and then kind of just give everyone the heads up that we'll be putting out the draft report for public comment in October. And then we'll be revising that in November and submitting it to EPA at the end of the year. It is due on December 1st. I know it was a lot of information and data after a previous data-heavy presentation. Happy to take any questions now, or if you have any after, feel free to reach out via email.
I want to thank you both for being here and giving the presentation. Before I ask a question, because I always seem to have one, I want to make sure I put it to the group first. And if there's anything in the chat or if Maya sees any hands up.
Yeah, we do have one question in the chat about the BAU projections and whether data center growth is being included in the later years of the projections.
Yeah, so I can answer this question.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So yes, the data center growth is being included in the BAU, but the reason it kind of shrinks off, especially in the later years, is because we're including the Virginia Clean Economy Act and electricity emission factor improvements in the BAU as well. And so the higher electricity consumption from data centers, especially, in Virginia and Loudoun County and Prince William County, those are being multiplied by a lower emission factor, which is resulting in lower emissions later on.
Quick question related to that. So I know in Frederick County, we just recently did our updates to our CEAP and our BAU, and we showed pretty significant increases in our BAU by 2050 from the data center industry, essentially almost doubling our emissions. And one of the things we didn't include in that was the state's grid policies. So I'm just curious to see if you've included Maryland's grid policies in the BAU for this as well.
So Maryland's RPS is included in the BAU, but the RPS that is included, it doesn't go all the way out to 2050, and we're also using a more regional emission factor that kind of includes generation from out of state as well.
Okay. I'm just a little bit perplexed by it because it seems like there might be a gap there in what you're including and what you're not including versus what's in our CEA. And we're actually discussing that internally because the numbers are so huge. And I know that the emissions reductions from Frederick County are part of what helped the COG region to meet its reductions in the first place previously. So I know that our emissions have some impact. Yeah, and maybe it is explained by the data. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I do think the big difference is whether you know, there's two ways to do this, right? Is you don't factor in relying on the state RPS and, you know, the anticipation of the grid getting cleaner in your BAUs, and that definitely, when you don't factor that in, typically for jurisdictions your BAU looks a little bit more flat. And when you factor it in like we did for ours, so it's just a different approach. Last time we didn't factor in the grid in our 2030 plan that this group adopted back in 2020. And so that does, for the region as a whole, show a bit of a flat sort of projection. But when you do sort of say, okay, we're going to trust that these RPS standards are going to be met and that the Energy Information Administration's energy outlook showing the grid getting cleaner, we're going to take that as that is going to happen. And you factor that into the BAU, then you see, you know, this reduction in emissions. But if you don't factor that in and you have something like significant growth in energy use intensity, in a high energy use intensity like data centers, then you're going to see more of an increasing BAU projection line. So it's just a little bit of a different approach, showing it a little bit differently than we did last time around. But you know, it's definitely under those charts are definitely under the assumption that those RPS standards will be met.
Right. It makes me wonder why we did ours that way. We may have to revise ours because we're no longer consistent with the region. Plus, honestly, it looks horrifying because if we don't apply the grid policies, the emissions from the data centers are a lot.
I think it's about the, you know, a little bit, it can be based off the story that you think is important to tell. And the way that you guys have done yours tells the story that there's a lot of work to do. And, you know, it's to reach those renewable portfolio standards, and local communities do have a role in supporting those and helping to get large scale solar on the ground to help meet those statewide RPS goals. So I think it's also a little bit of how you're, you know, communicating the needs and the areas to focus on.
Well, thank you for the again for the questions and the dialogue. The question I had was actually sort of along these lines. I know the slides aren't up anymore, but you know, emphasizing the greatest mover is sort of the shift to electric vehicles always prompts me to think, well, how clean is the grid, and how, you know, what are we doing to make sure that as we put more electric buses and you know, try to push people to electrify their homes and such, that we're actually you know, doing it in the cleanest way. And the extent to which these measurements and these studies are able to accurately capture the degree to which our energy producers are meeting their goals and are cleaning their own grids and making the sort of energy efficiency investments. But so I appreciate sort of the last couple of questions, because that was where my head was at too, about the assumptions about the grid itself. I see Shannon Moore's hand is still up, but I'm not sure if that's a new question or comment. Okay, it just came down. Okay. Anyone else before we move on? And I want to thank the professionals from ICF who were here today. Okay, Maya, am I good to move on? Do we see anything else?
I don't see any more hands.
Okay. All right. Well, then again, thank you for the data, and we look forward to seeing you guys again, I think in November. For our next agenda item, we're going to welcome staff Maya Davis and Alyssa Boggs, who will brief us on the key performance indicators being analyzed for the mid-course review. This is one of the key pieces of the mid-course review that we are working on this year. So this is an exciting check-in point. Ms. Davis.
Great. Thank you, Chair Bagley. So yeah, we are continuing the conversation and sharing data as it becomes available on the mid-course review. Today, we're going to talk about built environment performance indicators and case studies that we haven't yet shared with you. But let's go to the next slide and review real quick what we have shared with you. So the mid-course review, again, essentially we are halfway. CEEPC adopted a climate plan in 2020, and it's a 2030 climate plan, and we're about halfway there. So how are we doing towards our goals? Are we on track? Is basically what we're trying to assess with this mid-course review. And what we've done so far with you all is we brought this approach to you back in January and revised and updated it based on your feedback. In March, we brought a presentation on the renewable portfolio standards and the status of the implementation of those that we will incorporate into the mid-course review. Over the spring, we conducted a local government survey asking about local implementation on climate action, and we summarized the results in May from that. So we talked about things like, what % of jurisdictions are implementing benchmarking programs or deep energy retrofit programs? How many local government microgrids have been installed and are active? What's the status of net zero energy building codes and policies? And we were able from that survey to identify a lot of best practices. And so over the summer, we've been working to develop case studies, and we'll share some of them with you all today. In July, we brought to you all the draft greenhouse gas inventories. And we have had amazing engagement and comments and interactions with all of you all over the summer for the inventory, the case studies, the comprehensive climate action plan you just got a presentation on, and they're all, sort of kind of intertwined here. And we want to make sure that we are able to, address all the comments that we've received. So we are continuing to work with many of you all on revisions to the draft greenhouse gas inventories. For the rest of this year, we're going to bring you additional pieces of these performance indicators and case studies, and I think that'll flow also into your first meeting of next year. And then we want to be able to share a draft mid-course review report for you all in the first quarter of next year to kind of wrap all this together, right? We're bringing you all these little pieces, and we want to be able to wrap all this together into a nice package for you at the end of this. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So these are the sectors that are in the 2030 plan that you all adopted back in 2020. And the mid-course review is being organized underneath these categories, the report will have a short section of the report for each of these categories: greenhouse gas emissions, clean electricity, and what have you. And we have like indicators and implementation levels that were identified in both the 2030 plan as well as this CEEPC plan that you guys just heard a presentation on. And so we're kind of looking, and that presentation included sort of those implementation levels that were being assumed into the projections and the modeling there. And so we're trying to merge kind of both of those plans and the priorities identified, and working towards updating everybody on like 1 to 3 key performance indicators per sector. So we're not going to be able to report indicators and updates and results on every single indicator and piece of modeling in the 2020 plan that was adopted, or in the plan that we're finalizing now, but we do want to give a high level picture of how we're doing on progress and if we're on track. And we also didn't want to get ahead of the modeling for that. So you've heard some of the results of the modeling today, and that will help us sort of paint this picture in the mid-course review as we move forward. So in July, we went over indicators on greenhouse gases and the carbon intensity of the grid. Today, we're going to talk about other built environment indicators like the grid connected renewables, energy trends, and green building trends. And we're also basically we're leveraging that data that was presented on tree canopy from Peter Claggett and team, and we're going to leverage that to put into the mid-course review. So we'll share a couple of case studies from around tree canopy on that today, as well as these other categories we're focusing on today. So next slide, please. All right, so and in the at a future meeting, we'll definitely have to lay this out, but like each of those sectors of the report, we will have for instance, like greenhouse gas emissions, it'll have those performance indicators. We'll highlight results from the survey, and then we'll share some case studies. So that's where the case studies come in, and how each sector is going to be lined up, but we'll definitely try to help visualize that for you guys at a future meeting. But to get into the results, I'm going to start off by talking about green building trends. And so this trend chart shows you how we have been growing in green buildings since our base year. We look at LEED and Energy Star programs, as well as Earthcraft and Green Globe programs, Passive House, and Living Future Institute. And essentially, we've grown from under 100 third-party certifications in green building back in 2005 to more than 7,800 by the end of 2024. And we really wanted to dig deep here and try to be able to pull from this data, well, exactly how many of these are net zero, because we really the net zero is really important and called out a lot in our 2030 plan. If you can go to the next slide, please, we can dive into this a little bit deeper. Essentially, this is sort of broken down by jurisdiction and by the certification type and count for certification to give you a little bit more data and information. While the mid-course review report is going to kind of focus on that last slide and the regional results, we're also providing the local data and information to each jurisdiction to report out as they see fit, like in their progress reports or in their dashboards. And after we get this mid-course review done, we know that you all have expressed interest in an updated dashboard that shows for the region that also shows local and regional results. So once we get this report adopted, we'll work on incorporating that into an updated dashboard. But for now, we have this slide with some of the local information. We really did dig deep to see, could we say, here's the exact number of zero energy buildings in the region? And We don't exactly have that number. We have a lot of great information. All the detailed background spreadsheets have been shared with your local government energy and sustainability managers so they can see the details of all this information. But, you know, generally we know that like LEED Gold and Platinum, if you can go back to the last slide for a second, the LEED Gold and Platinum, that had like, in many cases, those are going to be net zero, but not in all cases. LEED has a newer net zero kind of certification that's starting to track and gain traction in the region, but it doesn't give us a full picture there. You know, passive house is going to be net zero. A lot of the living futures is going to be net zero. Green Globes has a newer like net zero energy and net zero carbon certification, and we do have community projects that are working towards that in the region, where they might be recognized as halfway there, but not fully there yet. And New Buildings Institute also has a database of net zero energy buildings. It's not comprehensive for this region, but we do try to capture all of that in the background details of the data. But there isn't like a single number that we can, you know, summarize for you that there's X number of net zero energy buildings. But we're hoping that we can get more of that as people and projects take on these net zero certifications more regularly. So now we can go to the next slide. Also something new, because due to a lot of interest expressed, we did pull out a separate database of just data centers that are certified as by one of these certifications. And so this gives you a summary of what's been actually certified. In the background database, we also have a lot of information on what we 100% can't tell is in our region. So there is a very long list of certified data centers in Virginia, but they're listed as confidential. So we can't tell where in the state they are. We could probably assume that most of them are in Northern Virginia because most of those data centers are located in the state in Northern Virginia, but we can't precisely give you that number. But for your staff and the local government staff that we've shared this database with, they can see that. So this gives you this is exactly what we know is certified in the region. And then there's another list that shows you that there's a lot of certified data centers where we can't tell exactly where they are in the state. We also know a common practice is to sign up for one of these certifications, follow, you know, all their sort of rules, but then they don't pay the money to get final certification. So there's a lot of buildings like that that we do not include in these numbers as well, because we want to give you what we know for certain. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass it off to Alyssa to go through the next handful of slides with you.
Thanks, Maya. All right, so I'm just going to make a quick disclaimer first that this data is draft. All the data I'm about to show you, electricity and natural gas, as well as the renewable energy systems, is draft. We don't have our BG&E 2024 data yet, so that's all a placeholder. But let's get into it. So here we have all the grid connected renewable energy systems in the region on an annual basis. You can see in 2009, when we started collecting this data, COG recorded 467 systems in the region. And in the 2017 to 2020 COG Regional Climate and Energy Action Plan, a goal was set to reach 30,000 renewable energy systems by 2020. And we actually surpassed that goal in 2017 with 33,827 systems. And here we are in 2024, well, 2025 now, but here is our most recent data point, 2024. We are at over 93,000 systems, which is over 1,000 megawatts of capacity. These numbers are solar energy and wind energy, but wind energy is a very small percent of energy in our region, as you are all probably aware that we don't really have the great greatest conditions for wind energy. But yeah, we're moving towards the 250,000 systems by 2030 that the COG board adopted a few years ago. So we're disaggregating a little bit by state. Looking at the grid connected renewable energy systems, we have suburban Maryland in red, DC in blue, and Northern Virginia in light green. And we can see that suburban Maryland is leading our region in solar installs. So kudos to them, but we also have been seeing a very steady rate of growth in DC and Northern Virginia. So moving into electricity, these are the residential electricity trends. The dash between 2005 and 2009 is because we didn't receive any data between then, so it was just interpolated for those years. And then there's that dash between 2023 and 2024 because that is draft data. But for the trends, we can see that Northern Virginia, DC, and suburban Maryland all are pretty flat throughout the years and follow similar. There's been a little bit of a spike in 2024. There is a little bit of a dip in 2020. Oops. Sorry, I forgot my little rollerball moves the slides. Anyways, slide. So here's commercial electricity trends. And we have it again, red suburban Maryland, blue DC, and light green is Northern Virginia. And we can see that DC and Maryland actually stay pretty flat throughout the years, while Northern Virginia has been growing steadily since the 20-teens. And this lines up with what we've seen in terms of data center growth. So switching to natural gas, again, Maryland, DC, Virginia lines. Natural gas tends to vary year to year more than electricity does because it's more dependent on how the weather is, the winter specifically is that year. So colder winter will usually have more natural gas use. And we can see that DC, Maryland, and Virginia all follow basically the same high points and low points. They just have a little bit higher variance in some jurisdictions than others. And then if we look at commercial, it also follows basically the same trends. They all are relatively flat if you were to run a trend line through from 2005 to 2024, but they have those peaks and valleys due to colder winters. So now we're going to pivot into the case studies, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Marley Moore and Caroline Sherman. There are DCSU externs who can't be with us today because they actually have their DCSU graduation. So kudos to them. Me and Maya will be presenting. This is all their research that they've done. So first, the first sector is greenhouse gas, and we're going to be looking at the city of Rockville, who developed a climate action dashboard as a part of their climate action plan and updates it based off their annual report. And the dashboard displays progress on the 50% reduction by 2030 goal, as well as progress towards the actions identified in their climate action plan. And having this dashboard allows residents to see the jurisdiction has completed 26.7% of their greenhouse gas reduction actions, with 60% in progress. And an interactive dashboard produces potential benefits such as increased community engagement and knowledge of the city's goals and progress among residents. So the next greenhouse gas case study is the District of Columbia. DOEE does annual greenhouse gas emissions inventories, starting with 2006, which is their baseline, and then they did annual inventories from 2009 to 2022. And these regular inventories measure the progress towards their reduction goals of 60% by 2030. And their 2022 inventory showed a 35% reduction in emissions from their 2006 baseline. DOEE also has Sustainable DC 2.0, which is both a plan and a dashboard, the dashboard shows progress towards 13 topics, which include climate and energy. And they show like renewable energy and energy efficiency. I would recommend checking it out. The benefits of having these annual inventories and Sustainable DC 2.0's dashboard shows residents' annual progress, which makes the goals seem less intimidating. So switching to clean electricity, we have solar co-ops. There are two different solar co-op examples in the region. We have Solarize Nova and Solar United Neighbors. Solarize Nova has a local energy alliance program, which uses community-based outreach programs to reduce the cost and complexity of solar installation projects in communities. Whereas Solar United Neighbors arranges solar co-ops for group purchasing of solar panel installations. Solar United Neighbors has either installed or is currently in the permitting process for over 31,000 kilowatts of rooftop solar across COG jurisdictions, and Solarize Nova has installed over 1,000 solar power system installations, totaling 9.3 megawatts of capacity. Solar co-ops enable residents, communities, and business to find affordable and well-vetted contractors to implement solar installation projects at a discounted rate. And my second clean electricity case study is Prince George's County. So Prince George's County developed a clean and renewable energy report and siting analysis to accelerate solar and other clean electricity technologies deployment in the county. So this siting analysis simplifies future solar planning and expansion and has identified over 97,000 potential solar projects with over 7,000 megawatts of total capacity. And the benefit is it helps progress towards expanding energy self-sufficiency and enables the county to support residents, businesses, and communities in their planning processes. Prince George's County also is doing a lot other work in solar. They have a solar research pilot program that launched in 2025 and provides a grant of up to $10,000 to residents in energy resilient communities. And the purpose of this research pilot was to obtain valuable lessons in the residential solar sector and enhance customer satisfaction before launching a countywide Solarize campaign later this year. And the county's also installed solar canopies at 4 county government sites, with 2 additional sites expected to be completed by the end of 2025. And this, I forgot to mention before that this report was developed in partnership with COG through COG's master contract for climate work. And it's near and dear to me because I was on that project. And this project will be released in October in celebration of Energy Action Month. And I'm going to give it back to Maya.
Thanks, Alyssa. So just to wrap up the case studies for today, there are more case studies that we'll share at future meetings, but for today, related to the built environment and trees, we have a zero energy buildings case studies. There is the mini Howard campus is at Alexandria City High School, and it is recently completed. It's pursuing the LEED Gold certification and net zero, and that's in line with Alexandria's green building policy. They've done a lot to conserve energy and develop a building that's 25% more energy efficient than similar schools, as well as a building that is 35% plus more water efficient than similar buildings. Next slide, please. So we have another school. This is in Arlington. It's the Alice West Fleet Elementary School. It's net zero. It's LEED Gold. I think something that's really interesting about this building is that a lot of the land was revegetated. It was more of like a surface lot or was, you know, not natural lands there, but they were able to revegetate and plant a number of different native species and trees on the property. 92% of the construction waste was diverted from landfills. And something that I find really cool that you'll see pictured on the right here, that is a power pole that is located in the school building. And it showcases the real-time energy use and solar production via this very interesting power pole. Like in a lot of these buildings, you'll see, especially at schools that are net zero, you'll see it in like more of like a dashboard sort of form where students can see it. But this is just a little bit more creative way to do that. And it helps serve as a living lab for the students at the school. Next slide, please. Since we talked about trees earlier, we wanted to highlight a couple tree case studies. The Green Buoy program has a Plant One on Us program. One of the things that we heard from our tree canopy subcommittee and foresters in the region is that and that has been recognized in our climate plans, is that it's really challenging to increase tree canopy via plantings on private land. And so you got to get pretty creative with that. And so Bowie has this Plant One Tree on Us program where they've been able to plant 442 trees on private lands to help meet their city's tree canopy goals. Next slide, please. Also want to share about the City of Fairfax Sprout program. This program works to plant on both public and private land. It's resulted in 365 trees planted on residential property and 320 trees planted on public lands. There was a lot of community engagement involved. So 550 volunteer hours were put into planting these trees and removing invasive species. And also, it's part of the City Jobs Program's workforce development program. And so they were able to help train people underneath this program, and 320 workforce development hours were accomplished underneath this program. So you can go to the next slide, please. That is the conclusion of our presentation. So just wanted to share the next piece of data and information we have towards mid-course review with you all today, and we'll continue to bring more pieces in the future and hopefully culminate and give you the full picture at a later date. Thank you, and I'll pass it back to you, Chair Bagley.
Thank you, Maya and Alyssa. And just for the record, we are 2 lantern flies down, people. I'm taking them down during the meeting. Any questions and comments, feedback from the committee members? I see Ms. Dabala's screen just come on. Oh, no. Okay. Anyone else have a hand up, a comment, question? Any of the staff from the various jurisdictions? I know that a lot of work goes into this. Maya, do you see anyone? I'm scanning and looking at the chat.
I don't see any hands or additional questions in the chat, but I do know that there are many people on the call today that we have been bothering this summer to help collect this data and information and present this case study. So we just want to give a shout out and thank everybody for coordinating with us this summer and our DCSU externs.
Oh, thank you to them. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Dabala.
I do have something. Thank you for doing this. This is a massive amount of information, and I wasn't prepared for all of the case studies. So when we go think about this after the meeting, what specific things are you looking for feedback on? What would be most helpful to you? Because I just can't. It's too much all at once. I need a little help here.
Yeah, it is. And I understand we're giving you like little pieces all throughout this year. But I think that
that was a very helpful slide to be able to go back and think through what we've already heard.
Yeah, and I think it'll probably be really helpful as we are able to bring you all the draft report that will show like all of this kind of together, and to help, you know, we at the staff, Alyssa and I in particular, we're in the weeds of all this data and information, and we do want to bring it up and be able to capture you know, like in the report, that we are or are not on track in these different areas towards meeting our goals. And so, especially when we get to that point and the draft report, if you all could let us know if we have, you know, like accurately told that story, or if we're missing pieces, or if we're not clear at that point, I think will be tremendously helpful.
And that looks to be in the new year, around New Year.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the approach slide. Okay.
Yeah, we're still working on developing some of the key performance indicators, particularly in the areas of electric vehicles and mode shift and travel behavior and recycling. So we still have more of these like in the weeds pieces that we're working on developing. And of course, you know, if at any point you're looking for some of this local data, we can share what we have along the way with the jurisdictions.
Thank you.
Mr. Washburn?
Okay, yes. I just want to congratulate COG staff, because this is a massive undertaking, and you're doing it under conditions that are much more challenging than have been previously. So I just want to extend that to you. The case studies are especially helpful for seeing sort of where the different jurisdictions are at, and you know, for the case studies focusing in on the District of Columbia, I guess it's a testament to the commitment that everybody that's involved in environmental justice has to trying to make make progress under these challenging times. I'm just wondering, I guess, looking ahead, at early next year, you'll probably be presenting more of the details of this plan to ACPAC, and also to the jurisdictions and other bodies. I'm wondering what's your timetable on that?
Yeah, we certainly want to bring this to definitely the draft report to ACPAC as well. We've brought some pieces of this to ACPAC, and we are open to, like I know we talked about, you know, various pieces, but not all the pieces that we brought to CEEPC. So we are happy to bring whatever pieces you want, Chair of ACPAC, to your committee. And we can, so before the end of the year, we're happy to bring more of this data and information and case studies to you guys. And as we lead up to, and definitely want to bring you all the draft report as well for your committee's feedback. So we can work with Leah Boggs on our team offline and you to see what is of most interest of this data and information to bring to that committee and to provide input along the way as we go. And of course, equity, I know that's important to you. That's definitely important to us as well. And we are definitely trying to highlight that through each of these pieces, the local government survey results, the case studies, and we'll have more case studies to bring to CEEPC as well at upcoming meetings.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. A question I had, and I've, we've gotten from other people, I think, interested in this space and in this work is, will the mid-course review sort of reflect back on our whether the 2030 targets, sort of, how, because the charts, I really appreciate them, but one of the things that, in Alexandria, we're certainly discussing is we're tracking our progress, but is the progress sufficient enough or happening at a rate to meet our goals? And will we be able to, in the, in the scope of all of this data, incorporate a check-in as to our relative ability to stay on track for those 2030 goals?
Yeah, we definitely want to be able to provide that, picture of what the data shows towards particularly the 2030 goals. And right now, like Alyssa mentioned, like one factoid we were able to mention is that, like, hey, we're at like 93,000 solar systems. Guess what? The goal is 250,000. Like, so like, under 500, 15 years ago to 93,000 is amazing progress. But 250,000 is still pretty daunting, goal to be able to reach in 5 years, 6 years, according to the data. And, I think one thing that we've been able to see from the data in terms of are we on track on progress is some jurisdictions have been adopting net zero energy goals for new buildings, but we could certainly use more progress in that space. And we definitely are a leading region in the country for green building and higher scale green building. But I think having these green building policies and building codes in place will help us get there even faster on the deployment of the net zero energy buildings itself. So those are a couple examples. And of course, the greenhouse gas emissions inventories, we know we're trying to get to 50%. And last meeting, we were able to share, at least in a draft form, where we're at so far.
No, I appreciate that. I think, Alexandria is in a conversation about, updating our green building policy. And so certainly gauging and reacting to the progress that we're making regionally and is helpful in that and helping, revise our goals and our methodologies and reflecting on our partners in the region and how they're doing it. Are there any other questions or comments in the chat on the mid-course review? We will be revisiting this again in November and then having the full update in January. I'm just scanning the screen. Maya, have I missed anybody else?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Well, again, thank you all for the presentation, and to the externs on their congratulations on their graduation today. With that, I'm gonna move forward then into our, we are, I think, at our committee member check-ins. So everybody received updates in advance of the meeting. I hope you've had a chance to look at those. They're also on the committee website. This is the opportunity here for committee members to provide any additional details or color about the updates shared, and to hear from staff any other additional report outs. So with that, I will hand it over to staff, who can hopefully lead us through those who have report outs to share from committees.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Leah Boggs here. I think in order, it's the Built Environment and Energy Advisory Committee. So we have chair, or the co-vice chair, Maddie Bizzardo with the city of Bowie. And then following that is the ACPAC chair, which you just heard from William Washburn. So Maddie, you're up. And then William, Chair Washburn, you're after Maddie.
Hey, good morning, and thank you, Chair Bagley, for the opportunity to update the members of CEEPC with the latest from our BAC meeting. I am Maddie Bizzardo, and I am from the city of Bowie, and I am co-vice chair of the BAC. On September 18th, we had our meeting, and we focused on the 2024 utility data analysis, the draft comprehensive climate action plan, and the draft workforce development analysis, as well as a review of the mid-course case studies. Following that, members articulated different areas of interest and follow-up. And this included what are the potential adverse impacts of EPA's proposal to amend the greenhouse gas reporting program on future GHG inventories. It also included electrification of existing buildings in mid-course jurisdiction case studies. And the city of Frederick has a writable contract with Compost Crew that other jurisdictions could use to support low cost or free curbside composting pickup within their neighborhoods. We have a very short update. Our next meeting is in November 20th, and that pretty much concludes our presentation. Like I said, very short and sweet.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Bagley. I'm William Washburn, reporting as the chair of ACPAC. And let me begin by just noting that our last meeting was held on the 15th of this, on the 15th of this month. And we dove into two primary topics. One was just a review of the mid-course review key performance indicators and jurisdiction case studies, which of course we got the taste of in today's meeting. And two was the draft of the comprehensive climate action plan. So both presentations were they were very informative, and of course they led to extended session of members presenting some of their concerns. And of course, data centers were brought up by several members. While DC is not, DC is not targeted as far as any data centers, although I had to look back at that chart. I don't know if one was shown for DC or not. I don't think so. But it is a concern because of these uses, use of energy, electric energy, and also their production of pollution, and also noise pollution as well. And we talked especially about those data centers that use natural gas turbines for on-site generation, and we pointed out impacts on surrounding communities, including reduction of biodiversity and, as I said, noise pollution. So there was consensus that this is an equity issue as to how we go about addressing it. Of course, that will be a challenge in this at this time of reduced resources and and shifting policy winds at the federal level, pretty much taking EPA out of the equation, which is unfortunate. But we don't have any control over that. But what we do have control over is our local and regional response to these issues, and we hope to continue to work and to monitor COG's efforts in this regard. Another issue that was brought up was the fact that because most of these data centers are on grid, they of course are contributing to increases in electrical energy for ratepayers. And this is an issue. This is an equity issue also that is going to have to be dealt with. We urged COG to look at more effective measures to encourage on-grid renewable energy production for these data centers, so that their outsized contribution to greenhouse gas emissions in the region can be managed and hopefully reduced. Also, we ask that if COG submits a response letter to EPA's proposal to rescind the 2009 endangerment finding, that it should include a statement about widespread adverse health impacts on vulnerable populations. And I'm speaking here for the district, which probably has a higher percentage of communities than other jurisdictions. Well, I won't start, and I'm not going to start any food fight here, but the reality is we have relatively lower expanse of tree canopy. We have a whole lot of freeways and paved surfaces that converge on the city, and so we're definitely concerned about these things. So that pretty much concludes our report. I will, in terms of announcements, next month, Chair Bagley and I will be co-presenting the winners of the Climate and Energy Leadership Awards, and this will be happening at the October 8th COG board meeting, and we hope everyone will be on board to check that out, whether in person or by Zoom. Our next scheduled ACPAC meeting is November the 17th, and that wraps it up for my update today. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chair Washburn. And I'm looking forward to doing those awards on the 8th with you. I think next is regional electric vehicle deployment. Is there an update there?
Yes, this is just a brief update today. Our next meeting will be on October 23rd, and we'll cover work by locals on food truck electrification and multifamily electric vehicle charging. Thank you. You're muted, Chair Bagley.
Oh, sorry. Next up is the Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition. Do we have a rep there, do we think?
Yeah,
I don't think they're here. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Maya.
I was just gonna say the same thing. I don't see them on here on the list.
What about recycling committee? Or
Yeah,
region? Okay, go ahead.
John Snar, COG staff here. Just briefly, in September, we just held our recycling committee meeting on composting in person, which we do each September. Our speakers included New York City, City of Laurel, State of Vermont, Ocean City, Maryland, and the University of Maryland on we're taking waste food and using it for feeding needy folks. So the meeting covered topics such as how to deliver mandatory curbside organic service to residents, how to stimulate the establishment of composting infrastructure, and how to use the latest technology to connect unwanted food with those in need. As I mentioned, the December 4th in-person meeting will address navigating regulatory and funding changes. And we're also doing our annual America Recycles Day contest for the region this fall with some school and other prizes, and that's November 15th. You can pledge online at our website. So that's about it for me.
Okay, and finally, our regional tree canopy subcommittee on the topic
Sure.
of tree canopy. Thanks.
Yeah, the next meeting of our regional tree canopy subcommittee is going to focus on tree preservation ordinances with a speaker from DC talking about the heritage tree preservation ordinance, which is one of the strongest in the region, and came up recently in the news with the Commander Stadium sighting. And fortunately, the commanders are committing to trying to preserve some of those really old trees in DC. Yeah, that'll be the focus, is preservation. And then in November, we're going to focus on equity and some of the equity programs around the region that are working on tree planting and redlined areas and so on. So thanks.
Okay. And finally, staff, I'm not sure who is going to give the update on the endangerment finding. Is that Robert there?
Yes, I'm
Thank
going to
you.
provide it. Thank you. Yeah, so echoing a little bit of what Chair Washburn said, the EPA has announced an intent to roll back the endangerment finding, which was issued in 2009, and allows EPA to regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act due to their threat to public health and welfare. The public comment period ended on Monday of this week, and CEEPC did write a letter opposing the repeal. And one of the things, again, thanks Chair Washburn for bringing this up, was to talk about the health impacts of it, and also just the other long-term costs in extreme weather that would likely result from the repeal. And thank you. That's all.
Are there any other staff or other member updates? Checking the chat real quick. Maya mentioned the Clean Cities Job Fair on September 30th. Thank you for that. There's a link in there about how to participate. Not seeing any other comments in the chat or seeing any other hands. I will note for the group that our next virtual meeting will be held on November 19th at 10 a.m. Please have a safe and wonderful fall, and we'll see you all again in November. We are
Chair
adjourned. Oh,
Bagley.
wait, I see it. I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Washburn, go right ahead.
Okay, just a very quick announcement. I think the people of the District of Columbia achieved a significant victory in the agreement that was negotiated with the Commanders football team. And this is with respect to keeping some kind of control on greenhouse gases. The city agreed, the agreement that the city and the team have signed on to in its original form did nothing to upgrade the Stadium Army Metro Station. And they were talking about parking for between 8,000 and 12,000 cars. And because of pressure from the city, the DC Council, with some pressure from the Ward 7 community, because that is the ward in which this redevelopment site is located, we got agreement that includes several $100 million for transportation improvements, including upgrading the metro station. So I just want to mention that and that is, as some people have said on air and online, when we fight, we win. Thank you.
No, I'm glad we got that in. That's great news to share and a valuable investment in the transportation. And as a former resident of 16th and C, Potomac Ave was my metro. I know that area well, so I'm glad to see it getting some investment. All right, with that, the playground is now full, so I hope I'm not missing anything that I can't hear. But thank you all for your time and attention today. We'll see you on November 19th at 10, and we are adjourned. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.